Pretty good rookie wide receiver class. Malik Neighbors finished as the number 8 wide receiver per game in PPR. Brian Thomas Jr., 15th per game in full PPR. Better than that, though, in non and half PPR. Lad McConkey also in the top 20. Disappointing performances from Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze. I think that's what's so interesting about this class going into their second seasons is that we didn't even get great production from 2 top 10 picks in the NFL draft. We could have a breakout maybe from Ricky Pearsall and perhaps those guys who went late in the first or early in the second round in the NFL draft. You know, guys like Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, maybe they have something to say as well. Dave and Jamie certainly have something to say as we welcome you to Fantasy Football today, talking sophomore wide receivers. And what's going on, guys? How excited are you, Jamie, about the sophomore wide receivers?
Yeah, it's an exciting class. You know, I think you got the 2 guys at the top that could be first-round picks in the majority of leagues, and then we'll see sort of how the trickle-down effect goes. But, I mean, when you look at the potential of it, we knew what it was going into the year. It was a very exciting class for, you know, dynasty leagues and rookie-only drafts. And, you know, hopefully we get a little bit more, you know, guys at the top that can deliver. And, you know, I think you named 2 of them in MHJ and Odunze that have the potential to hopefully join Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
And I'm real curious about the receivers that didn't do anything in their rookie year who could break out in their second year. And it's always harder to pinpoint those guys, especially in late February. But by the time we get to training camp, we're going to hear some good stuff about a guy I've been talking about for over a year now is Roman Wilson. We'll hear about Luke McCaffrey. We'll hear about Ricky Pearsall and the steps that he's taking after he showed a glimmer of hope last year. Those are the players that we're going to be able to hone in on and hopefully hammer in the back half of fantasy drafts and get some real good value from. You kind of know what you're getting from the guys that showed out last year. It's that other half of the class that we really need to pay attention to for the next 5-6 months.
Yeah, Keon Coleman too.
That's a good call. Keon Coleman, he could step up. There's a bunch of names. We'll get to them all.
You said the guys who showed out last year. Is that just 3 guys?
Maybe showed out isn't the right term.
No, it's fine.
I think there's 5.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to know because, like, you could say Xavier Worthy did. You have to include his postseason stats.
Sure.
Well, I mean, look, you got Worthy at the end of the season. You have McMillan at the end of the season, and you have McConkey. You know, I mean, we can't forget what he did. You know, as really the third member of the top 3. So, you know, you have those 3 guys in terms of McConkey, Neighbors, and Thomas at the top. And then I think it's kind of what's the trickle-down effect after those guys and who could join them. And so, you know, you look at Harrison, you look at Odunze, you look at Coleman, you look at, you know, these other guys that had these other, you know, some sparks during the season.
McMillan,
and Worthy, you know, and then we get some, you know, even Xavier Legette had a couple of moments in the middle of the year, you know, when Andy Dalton first took over. So there'll be some, you know, guys here. It's a fun class. It really is. You know, it's going to be to see how these guys sort of step forward. You know, the hope is that the 2 that were expected to be prominent parts of this class aren't busts in Harrison and Odunze, you know. And so after disappointing rookie season, really, it's, you know, to say disappointing rookie seasons, it's kind of normal rookie seasons. It's just the expectations were so high, especially for Harrison. You know, I'll say this for the billionth time. I've said it a lot throughout the course of the offseason already. His rookie season was almost identical to his father's, and his father had a Hall of Fame career. You know, so will he match that? Who knows? But, you know, it's like we sit here and we expected him to be Neighbors. We expected him to be Thomas, and he just wasn't.
Yeah. He played 1 extra game than his dad, but still, remarkably similar numbers. For Marvin Harrison Jr., who per game was around wide receiver 40, 38th in non-PPR, 41 in full PPR. And here are some fun facts for you. I've given this one before, but Xavier Worthy and Marvin Harrison Jr. averaged the same amount of fantasy points per game. One reason for that is Xavier Worthy had 20 carries, 104 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Marvin Harrison Jr. did not have a carry. Here's another fun fact. Jalen McMillan had 8 touchdowns on 58 targets. Since 2014, that was the awesome rookie class with Beckham and Evans, etc. 15 rookie wide receivers have caught 8 or more touchdowns, but none of them had fewer than 84 targets except for McMillan, who had 58. But buyer beware, Gabe Davis, as a rookie, had 7 touchdowns on 62 targets. And then I was thinking, I'm going to get your top 5 in a second, but who's the number 1 rookie wide receiver? Is it Thomas or is it Neighbors? In the last 2 drafts we did, Thomas went ahead of Neighbors both times. One of them, they were back-to-back. The other one, they were a few picks apart. But look at the elite company of rookie wide receivers, yards per route run leaders since that 2014 draft class. Odell Beckham Jr. is number 1, A.J. Brown 2, Justin Jefferson 3, Puka Nacua 4, Jamar Chase 5, Brian Thomas Jr. 6th best yards per route run as a rookie in the last 11 seasons. And the company he's in, Beckham, Brown, A.J. Brown, Jefferson, Puka, Jamar Chase, that's amazing. And then after that, it's Olave, Rashee Rice, McConkey, Tyreek Hill. That's your top 10. Christian Watson, Tank Dell, Malik Neighbors is 13. But, man, I can't get over the metrics for Brian Thomas. They are unbelievable. And who do you guys have ranked number 1? Let's get your top 5 sophomore wide receivers ready. You guys have a top 5?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, Dave, go ahead.
I still have Neighbors ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. It's based on volume and an expected improvement at quarterback in New York. I don't know if it'll be a huge improvement. It would be interesting if it were Matthew Stafford, for example. Not that he would necessarily be the best, but for the Giants, beggars can't be choosers. You know, they're not going to be able to get an elite quarterback. The best they might be able to do is Cam Ward. I'd love to see Ward connected to Malik Neighbors, but the volume, I expect it to still be there. He averaged 11.3 targets per game, a humongous number. It's really hard to fail in fantasy when you're getting thrown the ball that much. And he didn't have a high percentage of uncatchable throws. I believe it was 19%, which just goes to show that even with bad quarterback play, he made it work. So he would be number 1.
I'm sorry, he did have a high percentage of that.
I would say that 19% is not a high uncatchable target rate. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of receivers are between like 20 and 25%, and maybe a little less than 25%. I think once you get to 25, it's bad. Brian Thomas Jr. would be 2nd. I have McConkey 3rd. I've got Worthy 4th, and I've got Marvin Harrison 5th. Harrison is the only one that's not a top 24 receiver.
Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Lab McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr. for Dave. Jamie, how about you?
Same top 2, and then it's right now it's McConkey 3, Worthy 4, MHJ 5. But depending on what happens with Rice and the Chiefs, and what happens with the Chargers, and if they add somebody significant, 3, 4, and 5 could all change.
You think 1 and 2 could change? Because you guys had the same top 5. Neighbors, Thomas, McConkey, Worthy, Harrison. You think you could flip Thomas and Neighbors?
Unless the Giants start DeVito.
Okay. Again, I'm gone. I'm just done with football. If that's the case.
What if one of those teams adds a receiver in the draft? You know, Tedoroa McMillan somehow ends up going to those teams. It would be the most ridiculous thing. There's talk that the Jaguars could do something like that. That would kill the upside, I would say, for Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I don't know, man. What he did was so incredible, so impressive. He did a lot of it with Mac Jones. Now, I will point out that you got to look at the last 4 games of the season for Brian Thomas Jr. Before those last 4 games, he had a really good rookie season, but he didn't have the huge breakout. In those last 4 games, he was on pace for 140 catches, 1,832 yards, 17 touchdowns on 204 targets. In the first 13 games of the year, he was wide receiver 21 per game in non-PPR, 25 per game in full PPR, on pace for only 111 targets. So what happened in those last 4 games? Christian Kirk was out. He had been out for like a month at that point, but Evan Ingram also got hurt. So I think I'm actually Thomas over Neighbors, because if your only argument is volume, I think the gap in targets narrows significantly. Thomas started commanding those targets, proved himself to be the number 1 guy. We saw a report last week that they're not even expected to bring back Christian Kirk. I don't think Evan Ingram is going to be the guy that holds back Brian Thomas Jr. Neighbors might have more targets in it, but he might not. He might not. So if Thomas was that much better on a per route, per target basis, I think I'm going to lean towards Thomas. And I'm just a switch of like everything I've said, going into the year, whatever. But he blew me away. And again, I read that list of the yards per route run leaders. He's in truly elite company, and I got to respect that. So I think
you can play the draft board almost, so they're going to get drafted in a similar range. You just mentioned it. They went back-to-back in 2 drafts. I know the last draft we did with Thomas, where he ended up with McCaffrey in round 2. He was sort of playing the board to see if one of those 2 guys was going to fall to him. I think that's going to kind of be the case. They're going to be back into round 1, beginning of round 2 type of guys. Let's say Genty ends up in a great spot and pushes himself into round 1 territory, which, could happen if he's in the right landing spot. So, the first round sort of changes a little bit based on how we have it, sort of mapped out now. And you're seeing front end of round 2, landing spots with these guys. I don't think you're making a wrong choice, at least right now. So quarterback situation for the Giants is going to change some things. Receiving core for both these teams could change some things. The nice thing for Neighbors is his coaching staff is still the same. So, they're going to lean on him probably as much as they did. We'll see if things change in Jacksonville with Liam Cohen there. And you said it, all of his big games for Thomas, the consistent big games for him, did not come with Trevor Lawrence. Now, that's not to say Lawrence can't do obviously what Mac Jones did and feature Thomas to the same extent, but it was with a different quarterback that had maybe a little bit more of a YOLO mentality of, okay, I have nothing to lose here. I can throw into tight windows and turn over the ball and not have to worry about my job because my job is not secure. Trevor Lawrence doesn't have to worry about those things, but he also has to worry about protecting the franchise a little bit. So
I don't know. You're trying to tell me that Trevor Lawrence is a bad thing for Brian Thomas.
No. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying the mentality of the quarterbacks is different.
Yeah, I'm fine with that though. Like I think I'm like that's the other part of it is he's going to have Trevor Lawrence throwing to him. Maybe Trevor Lawrence isn't the great quarterback I thought he was going to be. I still will take him over whoever. Well, I mean, I'd take Stafford. Like,
no, he definitely.
I'd take him whoever.
Thomas definitely has the quarterback edge today, for sure. No question about it. That wasn't the point.
Yeah.
The point was that sometimes the backup quarterback is going to do some different things than the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Their win-loss record doesn't matter to Mac Jones. The win-loss record for Trevor Lawrence is huge.
Mac Jones knew what to do. And Adam, I know you're looking at the last 4 games. I would go back to post-bye Jacksonville to study what Brian Thomas did, because Thomas had some big games. We talked about that with Trevor Lawrence before the bye, but after the bye, they really concentrated on him. He averaged more targets per game than Neighbors did over the whole season. It was close, but he had a little bit more. It was 11.7 targets per game. He had at least 16 PPR points in every single one of those games. His ADOT didn't really change. He was even a little less explosive after those games. He just had that volume push that helped him become like a true alpha wide receiver. And you listed the numbers that he would have had. You extrapolated 4 games, small sample size over the course of 17 games. It sounded like Randy Moss.
Yeah.
And if that's the type of guy that we're drafting, then yes, you're taking him over Malik Neighbors. But the other thing that you didn't point out, yes, there could be changes at quarterback in New York. There certainly will be somebody added to the receiving core in both New York and Jacksonville. I don't know if it'll be a big splash or a little splash. The run games could be affected too. And I think it might be more likely that Jacksonville makes a move at running back to try and get some versatility there and maybe some added speed. And Liam Cohen has really thrived with some good running backs that he didn't necessarily need to spend big capital on. Not that he's the one that drafted Bucky Irving, but he did recognize that Bucky Irving was a better player than Rachaad White. And we saw that changeover. I'd have to go back to Kentucky and study what he did there. I would say that there might be a little bit more of a chance that Jacksonville irons out their run game more so than the Giants do, based on what the Giants have committed financially to Devin Singletary. I don't think he's going anywhere. And Tyrone Tracy wasn't bad last year, but they could still make a change there. There could be things that flip the order. There's no question about it.
The running thing, I mean, I'm not looking at it just off the top of my head. I didn't know. They had almost the same exact running stats last year. They were 25th and 26th, Giants and Jaguars, in rush attempts.
Yeah, they stunk.
They were 23rd and 26th in rushing yards, Giants slightly ahead. They had the same amount of rushing touchdowns. I don't know. A team with a better running game to me could just have a better offense, unless they bring in like Derrick Henry and run the ball 350 times with him. It's not going to really change my mind, but hey, everybody's got their own opinion on what the running game can do to the pass game. I do need to take a break, Dave. Sorry about that. We got to go for a quick timeout here. And when we come back, get a thought from Dave on this. And then we got to talk about other players and just the top 2. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
Someone says, Riper Minds says, you give Neighbors a QB and a little help, he'll be unstoppable. Look at his quarterbacks.
It's kind of true.
And
Thomas was unstoppable with Mac Jones.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it sounds like I'm being negative on Neighbors, where that's not the case at all. I think everyone agrees we're super pumped about these two guys. They are studs. What did you want to say?
If you're picking 12 and they're still on the board?
Yeah. So you know what? Actually, Thomas, if you want to come back from your vacation, I got a question for you here. How was your week off, by the way?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I went to Orlando. It was a little chilly to play some golf. It was like 40-degree lows in the morning, so a little chilly from South Florida.
Yeah, all the way up to Central Florida. You took Nico Collins in round 1 of this draft that Jamie mentioned. You took him 10th. And then picks 13 and 14 were Thomas and Neighbors. And then you took McCaffrey. Let's just say in a fun world where Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Christian McCaffrey had all been available, and you already had Nico Collins, who would you have taken?
I was going to take Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay.
But, we're in February. I don't know if I would do that in September if there's insane reports about Christian McCaffrey being back.
Yeah. No. Look, I mean, this is what's going to happen. Everyone's going to come to where I am now on McCaffrey. It's going to end up being a top 6 pick. And then, he's going to be a bust. And we're all
and it also has to do with just the quarterback situation too. Trevor Lawrence and DeVito, it's night and day. So, yeah.
Well, it's good to have you back. Enjoy the warm weather in South Florida, Thomas. All right. Let's talk about 3 through 5. And you had the same order: McConkey, Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr. So, Jamie, how clear do you feel on those 3? McConkey, Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr.
I mean, like I said before, you could see the Chargers adding a receiver. You could see the Chiefs getting Kelsey back and Rice healthy and not suspended. And Marvin Harrison Jr., we hear all these offseason reports about just how much better he looks. And, you could flip this list in reverse order. So I think there's, got to be a little bit of a fluid process with these 3 guys because there's some things that can change. But as we're ranking them right now, McConkey's coming off a pretty solid rookie campaign where he was the go-to guy for Justin Herbert. You have Worthy in the way that he finished, with Rice potentially getting suspended or not being ready to go with the knee injury. And maybe Worthy is the better of the 2. In the last, I think, 3 drafts, certainly the last 2, Worthy's been draft selected ahead of Rice in our drafts. And so we'll see if that's something that ends up being, the norm. And for Harrison, I don't want to, again, discount what the upside and the potential could be. The Cardinals may add a receiver to help their receiving core, because of what Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch don't necessarily do. And, taking some pressure off of McBride and Harrison. But what if they don't, and it's still just, guys like that. And then we're hopefully getting more targets funneled to Harrison along with what McBride does. And there's a chance for him to have a huge sophomore season. So they're all kind of bunched up. I do think, again, though, McConkey should be selected ahead of the other 2 just based on the way that he performed over the course of the season, Worthy the way that he finished, and, Harrison still based on potential.
And Dave, how, I use the word clear, but, with McConkey, Worthy, Harrison, does that you feel confident in that ranking right now?
Right. Assuming that we keep those words right now. Yes. Because, I mean, how clear is it? The draft hasn't happened yet. Free agency hasn't happened yet. So there's a lot of team intention that they're not showing us and won't show us. It's a better question for May than it is for late February. But McConkey, the way that he finished last year was unbelievable. He averaged over 20 PPR points per game in his last 8, including the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Was that all kind of out of necessity because the Chargers didn't have a run game and they didn't have anybody else that was really great in the passing game? Yeah, I'd say that's true. I would dial back that expectation for McConkey, but it doesn't mean that he can't, in full PPR, deliver over 15 points per game. He was barely over 15 points per game on the whole last season. He's fast. He's elusive. He can line up anywhere. He'll cross the middle of the field. He can do anything that Justin Herbert asks. And I still don't see this offense going back to, the old school era of running the football a ton. I think they're going to lean on Justin Herbert. I think they're still going to throw the ball a good amount. So I still think McConkey is the next best among the wide receivers. I love what I saw from Worthy. There is some downside to him just because of his build and because of Rashee Rice coming back. And who knows what the Chiefs will do to change their offense, especially if Travis Kelce decides that, raising a puppy is more important at this point in his life than playing football. And I'm skittish on Marvin Harrison Jr. I spent some time even watching some of his film this morning. And there's things that he can do really well. And there's a lot of watching his film after watching McConkey and Xavier Worthy. It's like going from driving a Porsche to driving a used car that's on some beater lot. He's not elusive. He's not as fast. He can do things like find soft spots in zone coverage. He can make contested catches. He can be a good player, and I would draft him to be an okay player. In fact, he's a wide receiver 3. And does he have the upside to be number 1? It's based on what? Does he get good volume? Does he start to out-target Trey McBride? Okay, maybe he could be a wide receiver 2 if that happens. But based on the film that we saw last year, I don't see the elite talent that made him so great at Ohio State. I'm confounded by it.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching him at Ohio State and I was blown away. He was great. And then you watch him last year and game 1, it looked like he was thinking too much. But when it still looks like he's thinking too much and it's December, that's a problem. So I'm hoping that he can get things ironed out like his dad did, like his dad's quarterback helped his dad get to. And he can be a great fantasy wide receiver. But for now, I'm drafting him as a high-end wide receiver 3.
So you're not drafting him?
I'm happily
not drafting. I think.
Where did he go in the last draft that we did?
I was just looking at that. He went.
Maybe name some receivers who went after him.
He went in the middle of round 2.
No.
Yeah. The other draft, he went in middle of round 4 to me.
Okay, so who are some receivers taken after him in the middle of round 4?
So he went right after Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then it was DJ Moore, George Pickens, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave.
Yeah, I'll take Harrison over Olave. I'm taking DJ Moore ahead of Marvin Harrison right now.
The thing I want to talk about that film stuff because I was watching some Harrison this morning and I was watching some Odunze, and I feel like if going from Worthy and McConkey to Harrison is like, what did you say? Going from a Porsche to what?
A used car on, I think I said a beat up car lot.
Yeah, and then I feel like
how like some cities will have like those local ads where some guy in a plaid suit and a ugly haircut and a goatee with gray on his chin and glasses will be like, come buy my car, our prices are great, and like you're buying a hoopty.
Someone buy Dave a plaid shirt, please. And then like if you go from Marvin Harrison to Rome Odunze, I feel like, hot take. I feel like maybe you're going from that used car to like the Tyco car that's in my basement that my kids drive around, because Odunze on tape, he didn't really show much either. But I feel like these bigger receivers aren't as special to watch on tape. They do things differently. Like I have pretty much never really been blown away by Drake London on tape. But these guys, they do different things. They're not going to run away from players, but they can still find ways to be productive, even if it's not as exciting. So I don't want to be too much of a film. I don't want to be too much of a tape guy, but that's what I've sort of noticed is like these smaller, quicker guys are more fun to watch. But that doesn't mean that like they can't be, that these bigger guys can't be Mike Evans, right? But like Marvin, because here's one thing that Harrison and Odunze have in common. They both had a lot of end zone targets, and they're going to have to do better with those end zone targets. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he was tied for second with 18 end zone targets. Rome Odunze had 16. Odunze had a horrible touchdown rate on those end zone targets, though. But yeah, so like Harrison, they got to find better ways to use him. I talked about this. His ADOT, pretty high, 13.5 yards. He had basically the fewest amount of targets of 5 air yards or less of any relevant wide receiver in the NFL, any fantasy relevant wide receiver, except for AJ Brown, who missed 4 games, I think. So they never gave him, they rarely gave him a bubble screen. They rarely set anything up for him, for Marvin Harrison Jr. It was so much downfield stuff. And I just feel like they have to get better, get more creative with him, because he's not going to blow you away on tape like Malik Neighbors is, but he can still be great in other ways.
You'd think that they would have figured that out during the season, though, and they didn't do that. So I checked on that stat, too. Throws of 10 or fewer air yards, he had 31 catches. The exact same number of catches he had on throws of 11 or more air yards. Okay, so he had 62 catches on the season, literally half of them closer to the line of scrimmage, the other half of them a little bit further downfield. His catch rate on throws of 10 or fewer air yards, he only had 46 targets. It was a decent catch rate, 67.4%. More receivers will have a higher catch rate than that. They should. These are easier throws to make. On 11 or more air yards, he saw 70 targets. That's a 44% catch rate for the number one receiver taken in the NFL draft. And 605 yards on 31 catches, 5 touchdowns.
But Dave, I was talking about 5 yards closer, 5 yards. Like, you can do any number you want, but I'm talking about really simple stuff just to get the ball in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s hands, and they didn't do it. They did.
Sure. That's where it comes down to Rob Petzik and what he does this offseason in terms of how do they retool things and work him into, getting him easier touches.
Yeah, and Drew Petzik, his brother, even more. All right, so that's 3 through 5. Again, 1 through 5 in the rankings for both Dave and Jamie. Our neighbors, Thomas, McConkey, Worthy, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Worthy, his season really didn't start until Rashee Rice got hurt. So I just want to ask you, who do you think has more targets next year? Of these 3, I'll throw in 3. Rice, Worthy, Harrison. Who's the most targets?
Rashee Rice.
Mm-hmm.
On a per game basis, Rice.
I'll say Harrison.
Yeah, I found it interesting that you both had Worthy ahead of Harrison, but all right, I don't want to spend too much time. We got a lot of players to talk about. So let me do some news and notes real quick. Dan Pompei of The Athletic says it appears certain that the Buccaneers want to re-sign Chris Godwin, which of course is relevant for a lot of players, including Jalen McMillan. Dallas guard Zach Martin is retiring. He is, quite frankly, one of the best guards ever. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Here's a weird stat. Rico Dowdle averaged 4.1 yards per carry with Zach Martin on the field and 4.9 yards per carry with him off the field.
Ooh.
A yard more. Yeah, this was almost entirely down the stretch when Dowdle was being featured and faced almost nothing but bad run defenses. Alec Lewis of The Athletic thinks the Vikings will let Sam Darnold enter free agency. New offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Ken Dorsey, said the Cowboys want to run the football. I probably should have put that note after the Zach Martin one. Sorry. But Ken Dorsey says the Cowboys want to run the football. Cleveland guard Joel Bitonio might retire. The Rams are allowing Matthew Stafford's agent to talk to other teams to get a sense of his value. We'll see what happens there. That could be a big domino. The Saints hired Brandon Staley as their defensive coordinator. He was the head coach for the Chargers when Kellen Moore was his offensive coordinator, and now Moore is Staley's boss. And some other boring stuff, but Chicago released Gerald Everett. He had 13 targets in 17 games. And the NFL is investigating sexual misconduct allegations against Justin Tucker. We knew about the allegations, but now the NFL is looking into them. So let's go to some wide receiver superlatives here. Most likely to be a bust. Sophomore wide receiver superlatives. Most likely to be a bust.
Based on the guys we talked about so far? Marvin.
No, anything. Anyone.
Any of them?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, fantasy bust next season?
Yes. Yes.
Oh. I mean, the guy's going to get drafted first. It's going to be Neighbors or Thomas.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
there's more room for them to fill.
That is true. But what do you think, though? Do you think that they have the most bust potential? Because I would say McConkey in the 3rd round would be my pick.
Probably Worthy.
I'd rather have okay. Yeah, I don't know where he's going to go. Like, because we have one guy who's drafted him in our drafts, and like he's taken him very early. So I don't really know. What do you think his ADP will be, Xavier Worthy?
It's so dependent on Rice and Kelsey at this point. So if there is no Rice, there is no Kelsey for the first 2-3 weeks of the season. Kelsey retiring and Rice suspended or hurt, he's probably going to be a round 3 pick. If there's, Rice is good to go and Kelsey's back, he's probably a round 5 pick.
Does anything scare you about McConkey?
Yeah, whoever they had. I mean, I disagree with Dave. I think they want to still be a ball control, run it, run heavy team. Because I feel like when they got away from that is kind of what sort of helped Herbert, but didn't necessarily help their team. And that was when Dobbins went down. I don't think that's Greg Roman's MO, is to want to throw the ball over the place.
Yeah, well, that was the funny thing about the hire, right? And about Harbaugh and Roman is sure that was their history, but they pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, in the NFL level, they've always had mobile quarterbacks, right? They've had Kaepernick, Greg Roman had Tyrod Taylor, if I believe, right?
Yep.
And then he had Lamar Jackson. So he never had a Justin Herbert kind of guy. So it is interesting because Dave is right. There was definitely a shift. Was it because a philosophical thing, or was it because of what Jamie said? J.K. Dobbins got hurt, and then they just had to throw the ball.
Well, look, I think they're obviously adapting to the modern NFL, and your strength is Justin Herbert. It's not J.K. Dobbins. As good as he was last year, your strength is Justin Herbert. Your strength is letting him open up a little bit more. Finding some sort of balance makes sense. We had this conversation last week. Dave seemed to think they're going to be more, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a little bit more on the upper half of pass rate and pass attempts. I still think they're going to be in the latter half and not necessarily near the bottom, but closer to that than they will even to the middle. So I just think it's going to depend on what they do personnel wise. If they go out and they're aggressive and get T. Higgins and then they bring back Gus Edwards, I mean, clearly that's telling you what they want to do. If they go out and they draft a running back, sign a running back, don't add another receiver, then that kind of tells you what direction they're going to go. So we'll find out, I think which way they're leaning, but you just look at the history of what this coach and coordinator are. And I don't think they want to all of a sudden become this pass dominant type of franchise.
I'll tell you what scares me.
Dominant is too strong.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what scares me a little bit about McConkey, because even in those last 11 games, it was 11 games of the season, was 10 games for him. He was only on pace for 125 targets. He was the number 11 wide receiver per game. 99 catches. This was his pace. 99 catches, 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns on 124 targets. I don't think he can be that efficient. And he was in the slot 66% of the time. You usually don't see these great seasons from a guy in the slot that much. So I feel like his efficiency will come down. And if they get anyone that's good on the outside, maybe 125 targets is realistic for him. I just don't think he can be that good with 125 targets. So I don't know. I still would take him in the third round because he's awesome, but I'd be a little nervous about it.
Would you say that if the Chargers throw the ball 60% of the time, that would be a surprise, or is that sort of reasonable?
Feels like a little high. 57%.
Okay. That's where they were in their last 8 games, including the playoffs.
They didn't throw that much. Where did that rank? Where's 60%?
That's almost right in the middle.
Okay, then no, I guess not. Jamie, you still think that's a little high if they're right in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the stretch where Dobbins was not there, and they had to adjust. And look what happened in the playoffs.
What happened in the playoffs?
Is their
Herbert was awful.
They had to chase points in their playoff game.
That's
That's really what helped McConkey. If they avoid those situations, then he had like almost 200 yards in the playoff game. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Let me take a break and we'll talk about breakouts, sleepers, wasted late round picks, Keon Coleman's, Ricky Pearsall's of the world. We'll be right back on F50.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
Which sophomore wide receiver is most likely to be a breakout?
Odunze.
That's a good one. To give a different name, I will say Ricky Pearsall.
How close are Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Not close for me right now.
More
Like
than 10 spots. Maybe even more than 12.
Okay. You guys want to talk about Odunze? Jamie, anything give you hope for him other than the new coordinator?
And the potential of Keenan Allen leaving. I mean, look, better Caleb Williams, better offensive line, better coaching, so all these things, hopefully, getting their hands on a, what seemed to be an elite talent coming into the draft process. Can he still be that guy? Can he be the guy that we saw at Washington? I mean, he showed some flashes of it. Once they got rid of, changed play callers and Malcolm Brown took over. There was those few games where Odunze flashed and they were giving him more opportunities. It just wasn't consistent. So, can he take that step forward in his second year? There's a lot of, again, things pointing in the right direction for him. So, I think you have to be excited about it. I don't think he's going to be the number one receiver for Chicago. I think that will be DJ Moore. I do think that if Allen's gone, that's going to help Cole Kmet as well. So that's another guy that can benefit with the coaching change based on what Ben Johnson did with, Laporta, and I think what he'll do with his tight ends. So hopefully Odunze is, someone that they build around. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. So it's a matter of, is he the clear-cut 2, or is he in the mix to be the 2? And if he's the clear-cut 2, then I think there's a lot of optimism. If he's, Allen's back, they add somebody else in case Allen leaves, and then Kmet is more of a featured option, then it could be a little bit tough for Odunze to have what would be a breakout sophomore season. He could still be a good second-year receiver, just not somebody that I think that's a consistent fantasy starter. And I think that's what people are kind of hoping for. Same with Pearsall. It's a great call that, he's got this big opportunity in front of him also. I don't want to talk about Dave's guy, but, they're very similar in terms of opportunity and ability to have that big second year.
The difference between them as of now is you kind of know the role that Pearsall can play. We saw it last year, and I'm sure he'll maybe even add to it now that Deebo Samuel's gone. He's not going to do you're not going to see Ricky Pearsall run the ball 5 times a game like Deebo Samuel did, but a lot of opportunities are going to fall into his lap. And that's an offense that we've come to know and love in fantasy, and we trust in fantasy. We're going to trust Chicago's offense too, because Ben Johnson is a wizard. But I think the whole key for everybody in Chicago is having Caleb Williams a lot more refined, a lot more buttoned up. And I think that that's what we're kind of hoping for right now. I can't imagine that there isn't a huge push being made at Hallis Hall for that to happen even now, where they're giving coaching points to Caleb Williams. Stop doing this, start doing that. Things that'll make him a more efficient quarterback. Maybe that means spoon feeding him things a little bit more. I don't know what it means. I don't know what Ben Johnson's going to tell him, but I would imagine he's not going to tell him, "Oh, go out there and play Superman like you've been doing your whole life." Now I'm hoping that they tell him you need to stay within the structure of the play and get the ball out of your hands quickly. We will give you those reads amongst DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, whoever else they have, so that Caleb Williams can play more effectively. And that'll lead to better things for not just DJ Moore, but also Rome Odunze. And I do think that Chicago will add other players to their offense. Keenan Allen might go away, but someone will replace him. The running backs could have an addition, but I think Odunze will be the number 2 target getter there. And I think that the other thing that we can trust Ben Johnson for, he will play to those strengths. And we know that Rome Odunze is, maybe we kind of talk about him in the same way we talk about Marvin Harrison. He's not going to blow you away with speed, but he can run. He's much better at being a good route runner, finding soft spots against zone coverage. A lot of things I said about Marvin, I think that they apply to Rome Odunze, and Odunze is like a bigger version, plus size wide receiver. So he can end up being a really good target earner in Chicago, and absolutely could be a breakout star for Chicago. But it'll start with the quarterback, and I kind of have more hope than not that Ben Johnson will make it happen.
Pearsall is really interesting because I don't know how much is going to be on the field. The 49ers had the 4th or 5th lowest percentage of plays in 3 receiver sets or more. They're usually a 2 receiver set team. You think about the other teams below them who played fewer 3 receiver sets percentage-wise: the Ravens, the Saints, Dolphins, the Chiefs, and then there's the 49ers. So if you're going to be a good receiver on the 49ers, you got to be on the field a lot. So how does it work? What's the rotation when Ayuk is back with Ayuk, Jennings, and Pearsall, assuming Deebo Samuel is not on the team anymore?
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah, it is. And obviously,
I think it's going to come down to how good Ayuk is and how healthy and how much he looks like his old self.
Well, it's probably going to be what Pearsall does early in the season, because they're going to baby Ayuk early.
I'd be shocked if he was given a full slate of reps.
Right. He may have, one of the, quick recovery ACL tears or knee injuries. I don't know exactly everything they tore there, but, every his recovery may be, on track that he's ready for week 1. And It could be Jennings and Pearsall. It could be Ayuk and Jennings. It could be Ayuk and Pearsall. It's going to be interesting to find out. And I think the thing with Pearsall is, I don't think anybody's going to say he's the best pass catcher of their group. That's going to be George Kittle, but he could be too. And if he's the best of the receivers, then why would you take him off the field? So they're trending in a different direction. There's no way you can compare him to Debo because they're just not the same players. He is closer to what Ayuk does. He's closer to what Jennings does in terms of, what he can offer the 49ers. And so, will they mix and match? Will they change? Again, this is an offense that could evolve a little bit as well. And maybe they do use some more 3 receiver sets because they could be a little bit different and more multidimensional in terms of how these guys run routes and what they do for Brock Purdy. There's also the Brock Purdy factor. What if he's a holdout and we have a quarterback problem going into training camp? Then it's going to make these guys a little bit more interesting and dicey maybe in terms of how we approach the entire 49ers offense. But I think just in terms of Pearsall, like you want to, I think, look at him, and we've kind of seen this in drafts. Like he's getting drafted as the 3rd receiver for the 49ers. I would take him as the 2nd receiver for the 49ers, if not the 1st. I'm probably not going to draft a lot of Brandon Ayuk unless he falls. But comparing him to Jennings, like I think there's a higher ceiling for Pearsall.
Pearsall, I'm just going to look at something real quick. I mean, kind of had this reputation of being just a short area slot guy. Well, not necessarily a short area, but a slot guy coming out of college. But he was actually looking at weeks 7 through 18, which is when he started. His first game was week 7. His slot rate was 34.4%. Juwan Jennings was 31%. And Jennings had a 9.2 yard ADOT, and Pearsall had an 11.5 yard ADOT. So I think that they could, that he could potentially overtake Jennings. They play a similar role. It's not like he's this slot guy that's only going to be on the field in 3 receiver sets. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. Late round sleeper of the sophomore wide receivers. Who's your favorite late round sleeper?
Ooh, I don't know if I have one favorite. There's so many that I'm intrigued by. Let's just start naming names. I'll start with Jordan Whittington with the Rams, potentially having the Cooper Kupp role. That would be really exciting. And I'm pretty sure he's been drafted in every single one of our mocks so far.
All right, Whittington. Jamie, how about you? Got a favorite late round sleeper?
I mean, I don't want to say McMillan.
Where was McMillan going in our drafts? Because I'm not even sure. Was he like a double-digit round pick?
Round 8 and
I took him around 7 of ours.
8 and 7. I mean, I think Keon Coleman. We have to say his name here.
There's a lot of names to say here.
I'll say Legette.
But Coleman, it wasn't really that late either. Round 8 in 1, and round 6 in 1. Wow, no, that's too early. You'll say Xavier Legette. Okay. Dave, am I pronouncing that right?
Legette. And he could make that jump too. But again, one of these more physical, stronger than fast types of wide receivers. He was a late bloomer in college and really only had occasional flashes in Carolina's offense. Could he be their number 1 guy? I mean, I don't know if I can even say yes to that. I mean, Adam Thielen was outperforming him toward the end of last season.
Most likely to be a waste of a late round pick.
That will get drafted?
Yeah.
Adonai Mitchell.
I mean,
love the talent. Really love the talent, but I'm just nervous about how many targets he'll get and what kind of targets they'll be from Anthony Richardson.
It could be McMillan if Godwin's back.
Yeah.
I'll say Jalen Polk.
I don't think people are taking him.
Well, I mean, if we're saying it's a late round pick, we have to assume they might get taken.
Went around 14 in one of our drafts, and he was
Whittington could be that guy.
Whittington could be that guy, no doubt. How about a Broncos receiver could be that guy? Be it Devon Vele or Troy Franklin?
I'd be surprised if Vele gets drafted.
I mean, who do you just skip over? I don't even think I don't know that.
I feel like we're skipping over some guys.
Well, I think we need to talk more about Keon Coleman and mostly him.
Sure.
He didn't quite fit any of these categories. We'll come back to him in a second. Here's my last superlative: waiver wire sleeper.
Roman, all the guys we just named.
Roman Wilson for Dave and
Polk for sure. Troy Franklin for sure.
How about Jermaine Burton? Are we just dudes sitting around naming football players?
Well, I think, Burton was when you said late round sleeper, but I think at this point we're looking at T. Higgins coming back. So if T. Higgins is gone, then Burton's going to be very popular with a late round pick.
Yeah, very true.
So here's a guy. I mean, you look at like Adonai Mitchell, right? It's tough to see with him, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman. It's tough to see him getting a lot of targets. But here's a guy who was taken right after him in the NFL draft. He was the next wide receiver off the board. Has a chance to step into the number 2 role on his team. Don't know who the quarterback will be. Anyone know who I'm talking about? Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley, obviously assuming Devontae Adams is not there anymore.
Sure.
We saw pretty much.
He can't play the Devontae Adams role.
No.
Or if he does, he's going to stink at it. He's more like Deebo Samuel.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say he was going to be the
right. So it's almost immaterial who the quarterback is, because almost any quarterback can get him the ball if he's going to run a bunch of short routes and get pop passes and stuff like that.
I'll be interested in Malik Washington for sure if Tyreek Hill's traded.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's a really good one.
By the way, the Jets' new offensive coordinator is Tanner Engstrand. He comes from the Lions. They're pretty good at getting the ball into the hands of good playmakers near the line of scrimmage. So see if Malachi Corley can take a leap. All right, let's talk about this stretch of the NFL draft. Right, we had Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze in the top 10. Then late first round into the early second round, we had Worthy, Pearsall, Legette, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, Jalen Polk. Legette, Coleman, and Polk. Jamie, what are your expectations for them next year?
I mean, Coleman's got such a wide range of expectations. He could certainly take a step forward. Remember, before his wrist injury, he was starting to look like a go-to guy for Josh Allen. The wrist injury suffered against the Dolphins. I think it was like week 8 or week 9. And then he could never get back on track. It just felt like he wasn't healthy. They didn't trust him. They were trying to work on Amari Cooper at that point. And so this is such an incomplete receiving core right now. He easily could be the alpha, but does he have that in his game? And that's what we'll find out. So he was a guy that struggled to remember his 40-yard time, or was his cone drill? Something was slow at the combine. I forget which one it was.
Yeah, so Coleman had the slowest 40-yard dash, but the fastest gauntlet drill.
Right. That was Metcalf did the same thing?
No,
not
Puka. Yeah.
Right, Metcalf was fast. So, does he have the ability to show that next gear? And look, he's got a quarterback that could easily make him a superstar. He's got a system that doesn't necessarily need the receiving core to have a superstar, as we saw last year. So, and they've certainly spoken about that. But they're going to add somebody. So do they go out and get a T. Higgins, a Chris Godwin? One of the big names out there. Do they draft another receiver early and try and add another weapon to their offense? So it's so up in the air about what Keon Coleman could potentially become. So there it was. It was week 9 when he suffered the wrist injury. Week 7, week 8, he started to show some flashes. If you're watching on YouTube and you see his the little bars there on his player page, there's just a lot to like about what he could be. So he's certainly somebody you want to take a chance on. You said round 6 in one draft, that's too soon. Round 8, I think, is a good opportunity. When you're talking about your 4th receiver, so you get your maybe, like for me, that'd probably be my 5th receiver. But looking at just adding a key piece to your bench to see what he can hopefully become, because there is still so much upside.
He had 4 games with 7 or more targets. He had at least 11.7 PPR in 3 of the 4. 11.7 isn't that great, but let's call it a touchdown or over 100 yards in 3 of the 4. I think the thing that's disgusting is last game of the year. Oh, maybe we even throw it out because it's the last game of the year against New England. 10 targets, 2 catches. Maybe throw that out because Josh.
That's not good.
Josh Allen didn't play.
Okay, yeah. So Coleman.
Well, he did play. He kept his streak alive. And then
they played a snap. Right. Let me give you the wide receivers that went around Keon Coleman when the draft where he went with the last pick of round 8. Khalil Shakir, obviously going to go ahead of him. Darnell Mooney. Would you take this guy over Keon Coleman? Darnell Mooney.
Today, yes.
Yeah.
Josh Downs.
No.
I'll take Downs.
Jacoby Myers.
Yes.
Yes.
Keon Coleman. Amari Cooper.
Easily Coleman.
Agreed.
Christian Kirk.
Coleman.
Probably Coleman.
Rashid Shaheed.
Coleman.
Demario Douglas.
Coleman.
Keon.
Last one. 2 more, actually. Ricky Pearsall.
Pearsall.
I've got Pearsall over him.
Now 2 more. Keenan Allen.
Coleman.
Coleman over Keenan Allen.
And Stephon Diggs.
No, I might go Keenan Allen over Coleman. I guess I have Diggs over Coleman right now.
Jamie, you said Coleman over Diggs?
Yep.
All right. And then how about Legette? Your expectations? Do you think Legette? I mean, I feel like it's not so hard to see Keon Coleman having a really good season, because of Josh Allen. Do we see that potential for Legette? What's the best case scenario?
I don't think he has the same ceiling as Keon Coleman by any stretch, but he feels like, this was the comp coming in. Like he could be Deebo Samuel if they use him the right way.
Yeah.
Legette?
Yeah.
Oh, Legette. Deebo Samuel?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Jalen Polk.
It
one
feels
of the
like
problems,
they're just
one
trying
of
to
the problems
overhaul
with
their
Legette
receiving
is
core,
like Jalen Coker was outperforming him at points toward the end of the year. They're undrafted rookie. There's somebody listening right now saying, "Why haven't you talked about Jalen Coker yet?" And
Yeah.
he belongs on that late round list
Absolutely.
of guys to throw a dart at. Quicker than fast, big guy. He's kind of like Xavier Legette in that respect. I think Legette's probably got a better pedigree and is a little bit more aggressive than Coker.
Yeah. Who else do you want to talk about? Luke McCaffrey, Devon Vele.
I would be interested in McCaffrey if the Commanders somehow go all off season without adding a big talent at wide receiver.
So I think we've more or less covered this, but I wanted to bring something up, Jamie. So remember, I gave that stat about Odunze having one of the worst yards per route run rates by a rookie in the last 10 years. Well, now I did a search for 11 years, and I included the 2014 rookie class, which is one of the best ever. Can you name the wide receiver who had a worse yards per route run than Odunze from the 2014 class and is actually good?
Still active?
Still active, yeah.
Brandon Cooks?
Nope. He had the 5th worst yards per route run by a rookie, of any rookie over the last 11 years with 50 or more targets. The only guy. No, Evans was really good. It's Devontae Adams.
Oh, he's still active, yeah.
Adams had such a bad rookie season.
Didn't he have like 7 touchdowns his rookie season?
He had 3.
3? So next year was the touchdown year?
I guess so. He had 38 catches, 446 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Devontae Adams is always going to be the player that fantasy analysts will cite when they want to make a case for someone who hasn't done anything in their first 2 years in the NFL. Nico Collins and Devontae Adams. Adams was just absolutely invisible as a rookie and Hall of Famer. All right. Okay, great. Good show.
Helps when you play with a great quarterback who kind of insists on using you more.
Yeah.
So Bryce Young takes a big step forward in 2025, and he says, "I've got to throw to Legette more." That'll be the path. That's the Devontae Adams path. If you believe in it, draft Xavier Legette.
Okay, that is it for fantasy football today. We got FFT Express coming up. If you're hanging around on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. Otherwise, we will talk to you on Wednesday. See you later, everybody.